Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's class. My name is Stefi Fletcher. I am a bartender in Bar 1661 here in Dublin, Ireland. And joining me today is Jessi Lorraine, the Slane Irish Whiskey brand ambassador of the West Coast. And in today's class, we're going to be taking a peek into the long and rich history of whiskey in Ireland and its impact on American drinking culture. So we're going to be chatting about the evolution of Irish whiskey, the magic of Slane whiskey in particular, and the thoughtful ways to use Irish whiskey in your bar program all year long, not just in the month of March. It's too delicious to confine to 1 month after all. So let's get into it. But first, there are 4 things that we would ask our lovely fans and viewers of this content to do. And that is like us on Facebook, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and also obviously follow us on Instagram. Everything happens on the gram nowadays, as we all know. And please comment below, ask questions. We love feedback. We want this to be an interactive talk as well. So all comments are welcome. And so with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Jessi Lorraine, who's got some amazing info on Irish whiskey for you all.
Thank you, Stefi. Hello, everyone. I'm Jessi Lorraine. I am the West Coast brand ambassador for Slane Irish Whiskey. And we're going to have a really fun time today. So I really love this brand. I have a super big, long 15-year background in operations, running cocktail bars. I'm originally from San Francisco. I'm airing to you guys from Los Angeles today. So very much California girl through and through. So I always like to say this is like my very Californian take on Irish whiskey. So let's get into it. So make sure I have my thing. There we go. So beyond St. Paddy's Day and the Irish whiskey revolution. That's a bit of a tongue twister. So we wanted to put together this presentation in a big way that, like, working on Irish whiskey for me, I feel like we get pigeonholed so much into this 1 month of the year. And there's so much more to this spirit and this category and just Irish culture in general that's really impacted the country that we live in. So I wanted to really explore that. So in the land of the free, Irish whiskey flows as freely as the rivers of old Erin. Its popularity a testament to the enduring bond between Ireland and America. I picked that quote because when you talk about Irish whiskey, the way that it exists now, it's impossible not to talk about the relationship between the Irish and the American countries. There's so much involved. There's so much going on, and we're going to really dive deep into that connection. So what is Irish whiskey? This is what we're going to cover today, a little Irish Whiskey 101. We're going to talk about basically the rise, the fall, and the resurgence of Irish whiskey and its cultural and significant impact for American culture. We're going to get into the Slane Castle and Slane Irish Whiskey, the beautiful brand that I work on, and how to utilize it in your modern bar programs beyond just the stereotypes that we know around St. Patrick's Day. So what is Irish whiskey? Irish whiskey comes in 3 types. We have single or pot still whiskey, malt whiskey, and grain whiskey. Generally, these are pretty easy to figure out. Pot still whiskey, you're going to have generally a minimum of 30% unmalted barley, 30% malted barley. It's going to be made in pot stills, as you can guess by the name. Malt whiskey, when you think about that, just like how you think about malt whiskey in Scotland, that it's going to be all made from malted barley. And then getting into grain whiskey again, you'll see grain whiskey, single grain whiskey. Again, you're going to have 30% malted barley in there, and you can use other grains involved. The one big common factor that's happening here in Irish whiskey is that malted barley is present. So you take those 3 whiskeys, and one of the biggest, the most commonly drinking Irish whiskey is blended Irish whiskey. It needs to be made from at least 2 types of these whiskeys. So whether it be pot still and malted whiskey, whether it's malted whiskey and grain whiskey, or pot still and grain whiskey, or all 3, as you'll see commonly. But that's what makes up blended Irish whiskey. So other requirements that we have for Irish whiskey. I think I skipped over it on the last slide, but I feel like everybody on this live could probably guess Irish whiskey has to come from Ireland. It is a geographical indication protection, just like when you think about how champagne must come from Champagne, tequila must come from those 5 states around tequila. The same for bourbon being made in America. Irish whiskey has to come from Ireland. So other things that are really important. Irish whiskey must be made from a mash of malted barley and other cereal grains such as corn, wheat, or rye. The use of non-malted grains is permitted, but the mash bill must contain at least 30% malted barley. Additionally, the only other things you're going to see in there is water and yeast. There's no unnatural colorings or flavorings are allowed to be added to Irish whiskey. Distillation. Irish whiskey must be distilled to an alcohol by volume of less than 94.8%. That's 189.6 proof in traditional copper pot stills. So it's a big difference when you think about that compared to other whiskeys that are distilled to a lower proof. It can, so sorry, my brain this morning, it can only be distilled up to that. So another very specific thing about distillation with Irish whiskey is that it's generally triple distilled. So in Scotland, you'll find more often that things are double distilled. The Irish generally believe that for the softness and the purity that they want for their whiskey, a triple distillation is necessary. Aging. Irish whiskey must be aged in wooden casks for a minimum of 3 years. Now, we're going to get a little bit into the origination of Irish whiskey, and that's not how it was originally made. That came a little bit later, but it is quintessential for what the category is today. Really common types of wood are used. Lots of American, ex-American barrels, lots of sherry wood in there. And it's not specified, but it has to be aged in wood for those 3 years. And then bottling, just like a bunch of other spirits, it has to be bottled at no less than 40% alcohol, so 80 proof. So the rise of Irish whiskey. Irish whiskey started allegedly in Ireland. There's some people who have a little bit of disagreement on this, but the first recorded indication of the birth of whiskey in the entire world really has roots into Ireland. I always like to put allegedly down there so nobody comes for me in the comments. That being said too, what'd you say?
I can't believe you put allegedly in there.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. I also am the brand ambassador for 3 beautiful single malt Scotch brands. And do I believe that the birthplace was in Ireland? Yes, 100%. But I do not need the Scotch nerds coming for me in the comments as they like to do. So we're just going to put allegedly on there. But the first recorded history was in the 12th century. So monastic origins of Irish whiskey. So Irish whiskey really traces its roots all the way back to the monks of medieval Ireland, who were believed to have pioneered the art of distillation in the 12th century, just like we talked about. There is the history of this potent elixir. Again, Stefi can butt in here, and I'm very California girl, so I'm not the best always with the Gaelic pronunciations, but Ishkabaha is the name of the distillate they were trying to make. It translates to water of life, and that is the origin of whiskey. So when you say it slowly and you say it a little different, Ishkabaha whiskey, it kind of, you know how language mutates over time. So from the 12th century on, we get into how distillation was pioneered. So Irish monks are credited for being among the first in Europe to experiment with distillation techniques that they learned from travels to the Middle East. Really, the roots of Irish whiskey comes from making perfume. There's a lot of really interesting lines to be had between perfume, elixirs, and oils and essences and how that informed the art of distillation. Now, as we moved on from there, a big thing with the rise of Irish whiskey, and this is actually going to be something that I touch on later in the presentation, but it was competing with brandy. So in the 17th century, Irish whiskey faced competition from imported brandy, which again was favored by the English aristocracy. To differentiate their product, they started aging in barrels, and that's kind of where we see the wood influence come to Irish whiskey. Ishkabaha that we were talking about before would be wildly different from the type of Irish whiskey you guys are used to today. So it was really around that 17th century that there started being a big push and understanding of what the future of the category would be. And then another big one that contributed to it was tax incentives. So in the 18th century, the British government imposed heavy taxes on Irish distillers, leading to widespread smuggling and illegal production and all sorts of crazy things happening there. To combat this, they made it basically tax exempt if you registered your distillery with them and legitimized the industry in a very big way. So we started to see Irish whiskey go from this thing that was monks and chaos and smuggling into something that was a little bit more uniform and regulated. Now, from there, Irish whiskey basically took over the world. It became one of the most dominant spirits that we saw. It was being drank anywhere that they could sail a ship to. It was at its peak universally. Now, Irish whiskey comes to America during that time. And this is where it's really important that we talk about the link between the Irish and the American, because American culture has deeply, deeply, deeply impacted the presence of Irish whiskey globally. So, Irish immigration. Irish immigration has happened in many different steps, many different times. The most significant avenue to get Irish whiskey to America was through the Irish immigrants themselves. There are multiple waves of Irish immigrants that happened over the United States, particularly in the 19th century. And we're going to get into that right now. So this is my very cute little map that I made. It's very, it's to scale, obviously. Stefi could tell you that's the exact same size of Ireland compared to the United States.
Absolutely is. Absolutely.
So the three really big things that impacted immigration to America, and this graph is the goofiest graph I've ever made. But let's start at the beginning. So Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell, British ruler, he really he popped off the pacification and conquest of Ireland, and by taking over the country, taking land from people, it really pushed about 50,000 people to move from Ireland actually to the United States. And then as we go from there, you started to see a lot more people settling in the United States. So that was kind of the initial first push. Through that too, most of the Irish that came over were actually indentured servants. So they were being put into situations where they were the labor force. They were impacting a lot of things that were happening with the rise of the United States. From there, the potato famine. Now, the potato famine happened from 1845 to 1849, and it was actually the biggest immigration of Irish citizens to the United States. There was about 2 million people that went over, and that's where you really start to see these interesting Irish communities pop up in places like New York and Boston, obviously on the East Coast first. And then from there was also corn laws from Britain. I don't think we have that on the slide, but Britain basically allowed for grain to be tax-free brought into the country, so it displaced a lot of Irish farmers. And then the gold rush, near and dear to my heart. I'm from San Francisco. The gold rush started in 1848, and what it did was it promised prosperity and the opportunity for wealth, the opportunity for comfort, the opportunity for a new life to all these people who had been displaced in Ireland. So you saw about another 1 million people coming over during that time. Now, from there, Irish people became the largest ethnic group in America. 1 in every 8 Americans, about 12% of the population claimed Irish roots. I think this is a really funny one too, because when we get into St. Patrick's Day, everybody says they're Irish on that day. And are they necessarily wrong when you think about, kind of how cultures grow and exist? It's really possible that the majority of people in this country at this point do have some, even in a small way, Irish lineage to them. So other influencing factors for the Irish coming over, trade routes were a big one. There were lots of trade between Ireland and the United States as the United States started really growing in colonies. Cultural influence. Irish people are fun. Irish people are the most fun, and their culture's fun. And so lots of cultural influence, including their drinking traditions, their songs, their stories. They came with the people as they came to these cities in the United States. Irish pubs and bars became hubs of social activity where Irish whiskey was prominently featured, furthering that production and need and desire for it across the world. And then, of course, as we all know, St. Patrick's Day, one of the best and sometimes one of the worst times of the year, but is really just like the most beautiful celebration of Irish culture in this country. And Americans have really adopted it and taken it on a way of its own, but that's due to Irish American immigrants. So other factors contributing to its popularity in the United States. I generally always try to stay away from calling a whiskey smooth, but when you talk about Irish whiskey as a category, the trip of distillation, the purity in water, so many things they go into to keep this, while very diverse in the category, still has a very clear identity and a uniformity that you can always tell when it's Irish whiskey. The smoothness, not my favorite word, but it's something that really resonates with, the general population when they're understanding why they love Irish whiskey so much. It's approachable, it's friendly, it's got a soft sweetness. generally you're staying away from those harsh alcohol bites and like acetone qualities that people get, especially back then when you're getting not so well distilled stuff. So the cultural heritage and tradition, we touched on that a little bit, but I'll say this a million times over. I actually just spent over St. Patrick's Day with our founder of Slane Irish Whiskey, and Irish people are fun. They're fun, they're convivial, they're a great time to be around, they're very welcoming people. And that was really attractive and appealing to people, even though they didn't have the most welcoming and beautiful start to being in this country.
If I can attest to that, originally I came to Dublin for 3 months, just to learn a little bit about Irish whiskey and see what it was like over here. I never went back. I've been here for 7 years because the Irish just are that much fun and such a wonderful, wonderful culture. And the whiskey is just that good as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, and then from there, global recognition and marketing. A lot of things really do always come back to an element of marketing. Irish whiskey's experienced a huge resurgence of popularity over the global stage because of marketing efforts of major brands. But back then, why it really happened is, again, it was marketing in a different way. Well, now you see brands like the ones I work on, brands at much larger companies doing marketing in a very specific way to create a global push. Back then, it was more of a on the ground foot soldier operation, but global marketing gets people to pay attention to what's going on. And then beyond that, versatility in cocktails, which we'll get into this later in the presentation, but Irish whiskey is such a versatile spirit. It can work in so many ways. It can live in so many areas. I always say one of the things I love about it is that any level of bar or restaurant, the nicest and finest and most expensive and fine dining places that exist, down to the least expensive, most rowdy dive bar, live music venue, it can have a home in all of those places. It's an incredibly versatile spirit. And then craftsmanship and innovation. As the time went on and more really beautiful, magical craftsmanship happened and people figured out how to make better and better whiskey, it just really ingratiated itself in the hearts of Americans. So the cultural significance and impact for Irish whiskey on American culture. Irish pubs are a huge part of the cultural impact on Americans. It's estimated that there's about 7,000 Irish pubs in the world, and 4,000 of them exist here in the United States. It's crazy to think about the possibility that there are more Irish pubs. And I mean, Ireland's a very tiny country, so it does make sense. But there are more Irish pubs here in America than there are actually in Ireland. It's why it's, again, so ingratiated into our culture. Beginning of the 19th century and on, when it was really at its peak globally, there were way more than that in the United States. They are, again, they're community gathering spaces. They are cultural hubs. They are places that have traditionally brought people together, allowed people to meet, to greet, to get to know each other. The spirit of Ireland, Irish whiskey, it's not just about the drinking, it is about the community. And you'll really see that through, as we talk through Slane Irish Whiskey. And I think it's impossible to talk about any whiskey in the category without talking about that element to it. Irish whiskey, really big in live entertainment venues. There's a big connection between Irish pubs and live music, live performance. That's, again, always been part of the culture. And it's been a big part of why I think it got so popular in America. And then culinary experiences. So food and beverage. When we talk about the way that Irish drinking and Irish tradition has impacted the way that we drink and imbibe and communicate in this country, it's really special. So the Buena Vista, I always like to throw in there, which is credited as the restaurant bar that really brought the Irish coffee to the United States. Now, there's some different stories depending on who you ask. I love to believe the Buena Vista story of how it got here in the early 1950s. The classic combination of a little bit of sugar and coffee and Irish whiskey was something that was originally in Ireland. And they like to say that it was brought over and perfected at the Buena Vista, I believe in 1952. Was when it was first happening, but creating this beautiful Irish coffee with the perfect balance of whiskey and coffee and sugar and a cream that is so perfectly whipped and settled that it will float right on top and you can enjoy as you drink it. The Buena Vista still exists in San Francisco today, and they're probably still the number one seller of Irish coffees across the country. But the impact that this bar had on not just bringing the Irish coffee to the masses, but also reaffirming the place that Irish whiskey has in our country and in our hearts. It's very important, just a perfect example of that. So St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day obviously is a huge thing in the States. I've seen some like different statistics, but it's widely regarded as the highest liquor sales of any day in this country, which it's funny when I say that to people like, what about New Year's? What about this? I'm like, St. Patty's Day, baby. St. Patty's Day is where it at. It is a celebration in every city nationwide. People start early, people end late. It becomes a whole week, and it is such a good time. Now, St. Patrick's Day, so the connection between Irish whiskey and St. Patrick's Day, it's deeply rooted in Ireland's cultural heritage and traditions. St. Patrick's Day, celebrated on March 17th, as we all know, it honors the patron saint of Ireland, St. Patrick, and has evolved into this global celebration of Irish culture, identity, and heritage. And Irish whiskey plays a central role in that for a couple different reasons. So the cultural symbolism is that Irish whiskey is a symbol of Ireland's rich cultural heritage, and it's deeply intertwined with the country's history, folklore, traditions. As such, it's like in a natural focal point for celebrations of Irish identity, including St. Patrick's Day. It's also a social tradition. St. Patrick's Day is a time where people gather, friends come together. You have time with your family. You get to celebrate and relax and be excited and be convivial. And that's something that always goes hand in hand with Irish whiskey. There's a reason we cheers. There's a reason that whiskey's meant to be something that's social and shared and special. And also the historical connection and the commercial promotion. So we understand that, again, St. Patrick's Day in the past, it was really common for families and communities to share a drink of whiskey as a part of their festivities, but also as St. Patrick's Day, again, got latched onto for different marketing purposes, as we do in this country. That's our favorite thing. It became a major commercial event in many countries, including the United States. I think especially the United States, where it's celebrated with parades, festivals, and themed events all over. Irish whiskey brands, including mine, we love capitalizing on that because at the end of the day, this is a business and I love transparency. But the major hallmark holidays, the ones that we can market and commercialize, those are the ones that really will continue to pop off in America, because if there's money to made and there's people to have enjoyment, that's the perfect recipe for it getting bigger and bigger. Stefi, can you tell us about what St. Patrick's Day is like in Ireland? Because I know a lot of people here, there's always the assumption with things like St. Patrick's Day and Cinco de Mayo that it is exactly the same, or whether it's same or different. But what is it like there when you guys have St. Patrick's Day?
Well, it's funny, my perspective on St. Patrick's Day, because obviously I've only ever worked. I've only had one St. Patrick's Day off, and that was the first St. Patrick's Day when I moved here. I don't remember past 2 p.m. of that, because I thought, oh, I can drink with the Irish. So I got up at like 10 a.m. and started drinking with the few friends that I had at that stage. No, terrible idea. Terrible idea. What I do remember is everything is just bursting with people and that good energy. And there is a lot of tourists, but also like when you get to the pubs where like a little bit out of the city centre, the more local places, they will also be absolutely packed because it is a holiday. And so everybody's off. And so what are they going to do? They're going to be drinking. And everything shuts down because everybody just kind of comes together for that community spirit. And Guinness and whiskey are probably the two best-selling items every year. People drink lots of gin here in Ireland. People in 1661 drink a lot of poitín. But that's the day for Guinness and for whiskey, because like it is such an iconic Irish combination, the ultimate Boilermaker, if you will. But for me, working in bars every single year, St. Patrick's Day, like I don't know what Cinco de Mayo is like. I don't know how the bartenders feel leading up to that, but there's always just this slight sense of dread. Like, what is it going to be like? How many people are going to show up? Are we going to have to clean vomit out of the toilets? No vomit this year. Was very happy with that. That's a rare occurrence in any venue. But yeah, so it's just kind of like, you're going to get stampeded by people, but everybody is out for a good time. Everyone's wearing green in varying degrees of tackiness. Like I wore a nice green shirt. It's not overly green. It's got other stripes on it as well, but I was like, that'll be enough. I'm actually the only person in the venue who dressed in green for St. Patrick's Day, because our whole thing is in 1661 is we don't want to play into that stereotypical Irish, marketing gimmick. And so we don't decorate. Apparently we don't wear green. Nobody told me.
Except for you.
Yeah, I got away with it. It was a nice subtle shirt.
I love that.
Yeah, it's about celebrating that community. So
it's so funny too. So I've never been in Ireland for St. Patrick's Day, but getting to spend St. Patrick's Day this last week with one of our co-founder of Slane, who I'll get more into later. But I always ask him what it's like. And again, we'll get more into Slane, but in Slane Village, where our distillery is, again, it's more of a village. It's a very small community, and they do like a really fun parade. But he's like, there isn't this crazy like drinking it's not this crazy party like that, but when you get into Dublin it is, and that makes sense. And he said that to me before, but then I was like, what are you guys doing at the castle for St. Patrick's Day this year? And he's like, oh, we're having a rave. So they had a rave on the farm at the castle this year for about 2,000 people, and lots of amazing green rave lights and fun. And I was like, we should make this a thing, St. Patrick's Day rave. It feels right.
That sounds like a lot more fun than tripping over drunk people in Dublin.
Absolutely.
But it's a good time. It was a good time.
All right, moving on from St. Patrick's Day. So let's talk about the impact of Irish whiskey on America. So the global appreciation. Irish whiskey is so popular around the world. There's exports to 130 countries, and its distinctive smoothness and versatility has made it a favorite among whiskey enthusiasts and cocktail connoisseurs alike. And we're in this space too, where it's like really ensuring that the legacy will continue. The social implications, Irish whiskey is a symbol of conviviality and camaraderie. And that's one of the things I love about it. It's fun. It's exciting. It's about family. It's about friends. It's got this beautiful spirit of not just the distilled spirit, little play on words there, but it's got this like spirit and joy to it. And that's a huge part that's the legacy ingrained within it. And I think that's really enjoyed all over. And then the economic impact. American interest in Irish whiskey actually saved the Irish whiskey industry. And we're going to get into that also. It's also brought waves of tourism to Ireland to enjoy the culture there, enjoy whiskey. And I think that's one of the magical things about sharing, again, the spirit of Ireland with people, is that it reinvest people in what Ireland is. So the Irish whiskey decline. Now, just as things go up, things come down. So let's talk about how that happened. So Irish whiskey began a steady decline in the 20th century for a variety of reasons. Ireland got its independence from Britain in 1922, and that was a great thing for them, but it also meant that they were cut off from all the British markets and all the British trade, which really ripped away a lot of sales opportunities and access to the rest of the world for them. American Prohibition started in 1920. Americans have for a very long time been some of the biggest consumers of Irish whiskey. And again, having that market cut off again was just a very harsh blow to the Irish whiskey industry. Competition from Scotch whiskey industry. As the rise of blended Scotch came about, so did more competition for Irish whiskey to be enjoyed. There were during that time, many issues with politics and misguided practices through the Irish government that also impacted it. And from what was a burgeoning industry, they got down to at one point just 2 distilleries remaining in the country. Now, as the decline happened, so did the Irish whiskey revolution. And that's where we are going to bring on the 1980s. For anybody doesn't know, because I know there's a lot of young bartenders out here, and even this is a little bit before my time, but this is a picture of the cast of Cheers, which was Cheers was a show that aired in the 1980s through the 1990s and really popularized Irish whiskey, Irish drinking, Irish culture, Irish pubs in the United States. And the funny thing about this is that it was never said that Cheers was an Irish bar, but it had all the makings of it. The bartender's name was Sam Malone. It was based out of this bar in Boston where there's a huge Irish community. You look around, you experience the vibe, many Irish last names. Like, they didn't have to say that it was an Irish pub. We could feel that it was an Irish pub. And it really lent to the trendiness of Irish culture and Irish pubs in America. And then also, again, marketing, baby, marketing is everything. So there was a the Guinness Irish pub concept and then the Irish Pub Company. These were basically two concepts that they went across the world trying to spread Irish culture through the means of building out the formula for creating great Irish pubs across the country. The Irish Pub Company alone, between over the 90s, opened more than 2,000 new Irish bars in over 53 countries around the world. It's interesting too, when you get into things like that, you'll see that's happen when I found this out recently because I live very close to Thai Town in LA. But you know how when you go to Thai restaurants across the country, there's a very specific formula to certain Thai restaurants. The same with like a specific type of Chinese restaurant. And if you go to these countries, the food does not always match up completely. And it's that same thing. People create these global marketing concepts because they want to spread their culture. And it was this, and then they invest in people opening those business because for two reasons: help with economics of people from their country and also bring tourism and interest back to the country. And that's exactly what these two concepts did. And then Irish pubs are profitable. They're actually the most profitable format for bars in this country. Everybody who's interested in taking a bar, take notes of that. Irish pubs. So according to the Irish Pub Company, 47.4% of the Irish themed pubs have an average check spend of more than this info is a little bit a few years back, backdated, but average check spend of more than $52 and 42.1% on average have an average beverage check spend of more than $13. So both of those numbers, according to them, they significantly outperform industry averages. It's funny when I think about that because I live in Los Angeles and I spend a lot of time in Los Angeles and San Francisco, which are wildly expensive places to live. And I spend $25 on cocktails very regularly. Those numbers actually, when you think about the national averages, often more double what the check averages and the profitability are for other bar metrics. So just a thought is that why these Irish pubs stick around for so long, besides the fact that people love them, is that they're viable business models. And then so from there, the revitalization of the industry. So this man right here, John Teeling, so he founded the Cooley Distillery in 1987. Kilbeggan was made out of there. But this was a huge turning point for distilleries in Ireland. So it was the first new whiskey distillery in Ireland in over a century at the time. And the Irish whiskey industry was experiencing, again, we said decline and consolidation. And John Teeling investing into this and creating this thing, he represented a very significant departure from the status quo and what was being expected at the time. They focused on high quality producing premium Irish whiskey using traditional methods. And what they did was they helped revitalize the category. Again, we were talking about there were only 2 distilleries open at the time, one producing a variety of brands, but it helped create diversity and get us a little bit out of this pigeonhole that Irish whiskey had gotten into because it had been ravaged by so many things. And so from there, Irish whiskey, I believe there's almost 40 distilleries that are either open and distilling or permitted, but we went from having so little to it being one of the fastest growing categories in the world right now because of such a reinvested interest in it. So that brings us to the Slane Castle. So this is the actual picture of the Slane Castle where our distillery is. We are in County Meath, just 30 minutes north of Dublin. Our founder, Alex, he likes to say, he's like, it's the perfect stop off when you need a beautiful Irish coffee and you want to experience one last thing in Ireland right after the airport, because it's 30 minutes away from the Dublin airport. But that is the Slane Castle. The village is called Slane. It has been in the Cunningham family for about 300 years. So these are actually the founders of our brand. On the left, you will see Lord Henry Cunningham. That's Alex's father. Alex to his right is his son. They are the perfect, everything that I've talked about Irish people being warm and convivial and fun, and they are exactly that. I couldn't ask to work with a better family and be more excited about the people who transpired this. They care so much about Irish culture and tradition. And a big part of why this distillery came to be was for exactly that reason. Now, actually, before we get into that, so I mentioned that the castle's been in the Cunningham's family for 300 years. And one of the things I always like to talk about is this beautiful story that Alex tells is Alex actually grew up at the castle. And it's funny when you think, oh, I'm just a nice Irishman that grew up in a castle, and now I make whiskey, and we'll get into all the crazy things, but it's really, it's a venture of love and tradition and family. Alex likes to tell his story about how when he was younger and his dad was doing all these things to keep the castle alive, because, as you guys can imagine, it's very expensive and a lot of work if you don't have the means to keep an operation like that running. It's a historical landmark. It's one of the few estates in Ireland that's actually still in the hands of the original family. And Alex, at a very young age, telling his father, I can't wait till the day that I get to own Slane Castle. And it's the sentiment that I love, as his dad said to him. He said, Alex, you're never going to own this place. What I'm doing here is I'm taking care of this place for the next generation, because this is important to the Irish people. And one day you're going to get to be the person that takes care of it. Nobody gets to own this place. This place is for everybody. And I think that's a really special thing. So part of the resurrection, and not so much resurrection, but the means of creating more excitement and center to the Slane Castle, there was a time, again, in the 70s, early on, where there was a fear of losing the castle or having to sell it to higher interest and all that. And so Lord Henry, he created a bunch of different avenues for getting interest to the village of Slane, getting interests and supporting their economy. They created a nightclub in the basement of the castle. There was a bread and breakfast that both of his parents used to run. And then music came to Slane Castle. So if any of you know Irish history, the early 1980s, there was a lot of things going on, and it was not considered one of the safest places for outside tourists to come. Lord Henry, he's a wild man, and he is not somebody who is going to listen to other people. And what he did was he created the biggest at the time outdoor live music venue right at the Slane Castle. This ticket that you see here is actually from the very first concert at the Slane Castle in 1981. There were about 20,000 people. The picture to the right is more modern. There's about 80,000 people that join us every year that we do a concert. But featuring, again, brilliant, big Irish artists at the time, Thin Lizzy. And I put this one that says "and guests" because at the time opening up for Thin Lizzy was just, a little tiny, little known Irish band called U2, who nobody knew. And it absolutely set off a trajectory, not just for their career, but they have a big connection to the castle, and it's a big part of the story of how this Irish whiskey came to be. So again, we do these concerts almost every year. Sometimes we skip a year. This last year we did Harry Styles, which was a huge thing for Slane because it kind of ushered in a very new audience to Slane, the Slane Castle. Traditionally, we've had Thin Lizzy many times, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Madonna. The Rolling Stones were the first ever international act to play there, and it really created, what it did was it brought international artists back to playing in not just Slane, but in Ireland. And it helped revitalize the music scene and the live music interests across the country. So everybody in Ireland knows Slane Castle for these concerts. And now we really want to talk about how that inspired the whiskey. So Alex Cunningham, who I mentioned, our co-founder, he is also our global ambassador and just one of the best people I've ever met in my life. He has got a brilliant, beautiful family. His wife, Karina, is basically his business partner in life and love and everything. And they have 3 gorgeous kids. They live at the castle. We'll get into all the fun things that they have there. So on our estate, the River Boyne flows right through it. And one of the things I love talking about, not just in Ireland, but across the UK, is that when you see the best places for distilleries, often, especially traditionally, distilleries used to pop up in the old times wherever there was the good product to make the whiskey. So we have an incredible water source running right through the property. Rock Farm Slane is actually a, I believe, 90-acre organic farm that Alex set up with his wife, Karina. They run the farm, but we grow lots of beautiful Irish barley there. So in Irish whiskey, the barley doesn't have to be Irish. There's actually a lot of grains that get imported to Ireland that goes into Irish whiskey. We use 100% Irish barley in our whiskey, the majority of which Alex and the family and the team are growing right on Rock Farm Slane at the castle. He really wanted to create this brand with his dad to be an expression of the land and the culture and the family and what exactly Slane is and get more people interested in it. Alex is also a former ambassador. So he was it's interesting because it really fits in with the timeline when you talk about in the 1980s and on, there being a reinvested interest to Ireland. In the 1990s, it's funny, he told me he had two options for this. So again, it was part of a cultural program. He finished up MBA in Cape Town and was two options for being an ambassador abroad. It was, I forget where, I think it was in England, but I could be wrong on that one, but to be the ambassador for Irish beef, or he could go to Australia and be the ambassador for Jameson. And when it came to beef and whiskey, he's like, whiskey sounded a lot more fun. So off he went to Australia. He was the ambassador for Jameson in Australia for quite a while. It's funny too, when you think about brand ambassadors didn't really exist on the scale that they exist today. And I was like, what was that like in the 90s when you were doing that? He's like, it was a party. It was a party. And I was Irish. We were doing Irish and we were doing party. And what a great time, honestly, that would sound like. But it really inspired the idea for the creation of this brand. So again, everything they do at the Slane Castle is for the longevity and preserving the history and the legacy of the Slane Castle, preserving it for the Irish people. And he had the idea to create this Irish whiskey brand with his father, A, because he had experience working in whiskey. It's a big part of his life, his history, and his heart. And B, growing up in the castle. So when that first concert happened in 1981, Alex was actually, I think he was about 9 years old, 8 or 9, right in there. There's all these really cool pictures too, stuff of him at different concerts and just around these rock stars when they come to do these shows. And he's like shirtless, running around 10 years old, being crazy, which like, what a charmed life to live. But you two, I mentioned, they lived at the castle for a period of time. They actually recorded one of their albums there. There was always a history and a culture of whiskey and music going hand in hand together. They said that every time somebody was making music at the castle, anytime somebody was playing the castle, they always had what they called a session whiskey to go around. Something that was delicious, something that was friendly, was approachable, and it just helped with the creation of really beautiful music and brought people together. And so that was the idea for Slane. They wanted to create a session whiskey that was good to go with everything and would bring people together and would have an exceptional flavor to boot. So bring on Brown-Forman. So they actually started originally, there was Slane Castle whiskey, and it was all purchase whiskey that they were blending and selling from the castle. And then the partnership with Brown-Forman, Daddy Brown-Forman, as I like to call him. The idea with that, and I've actually asked Alex this, is Brown-Forman, as we know, is one of the biggest provider of American whiskey barrels to the world. And Alex really wanted to partner with, there's two big reasons with Brown-Forman is A, we're a family-owned company. We're based out of Louisville, Kentucky, and it really is a family environment. The Browns have been a big part and still own this company, and many of their family members are working in it today. But there is this element and environment of family that's really important to the Cunninghams because that's how they run the castle. That's how they run their businesses. But again, to the American market, the biggest consumers of Irish whiskey worldwide. So he really wanted to make sure he was doing something that would resonate and support the people who have supported Irish whiskey for so long. So the Slane Distillery. So the Slane Distillery is actually built at the castle in buildings that were actually no longer being used. Now they are historical buildings. So the production and process to get this distillery up and running was quite a bit because they had to respect it's essentially a historical landmark and had to follow very specific rules, make sure that they were respecting the guidelines of the county, the Irish government, and give life back into these buildings and do something really special out of there. So copper pot stills, very classic, right on the grounds of the property. We started distilling in 2017. So as you guys could probably guess, with any new whiskey distillery, we've bought some whiskey from other people to get this blend that we're going to get into going off. But we're in this stage now where, since we've been distilling since 2017, we're in a process of migrating 100% into whiskey that we've distilled and aged right there on the property. That process is going to take at least a handful of more years, but it's really exciting to see the future of what this distillery has, because right now we have got one whiskey here in America that I am going to share with you guys. So what makes up our whiskey? Three things. Again, I already mentioned this is barley. We use 100% Irish barley, the majority of which we grow at Slane Rock Farm and around our estate. This top picture to the left here, that's actually the River Boyne flowing right under the bridge to the castle. It goes right through the heart of the estate and has such an impact on the landscape there. It has such a huge impact on the whiskey and the flavor profile. Yeast. Yeast is obviously important. Again, these are the three ingredients that go into any Irish whiskey, which is actually, I'll get into that when we talk about our master distiller now. But again, the water source of the River Boyne, the Irish barley, it really is a beautiful expression of the land at Slane Castle, of the land in County Meath. It's a beautiful expression of exactly what kind of culture, and it is a little bit more rural up there, but the culture and the history and the tradition and the vegetation of that area. So Slane Irish Whiskey is a triple cask whiskey. This is our flagship brand. This is the one that's here to stay. As we move on, we will have different things like pot still whiskey we have laid down. I just got to taste. We didn't touch on this too much. I know there was a lot of talk about poaching and some of the other educations this week, but I have a bottle, and if anybody's in LA and wants to taste it, let me know. But of essentially our new make spirit, 50% single pot still. And I am so excited for the future of what this whiskey looks like, because the flavors, there's so much potential and versatility and magic that's going to have now. But so for the triple cask, we use 3 types of barrels on our whiskey: a virgin American oak, a seasoned barrel, which I'll get into, and an ex-sherry barrel. Now, virgin American oak, you can guess, Daddy Brown-Forman. One of the beautiful things about the partnership with Brown-Forman is that we have access to some of the best barrel facilities in the world. The virgin American oak is coming from our cooperages in the States. We use a medium char, a heavy toast, and it contributes so much beautiful flavors. I like to say baking spice, toasted oak, marshmallow, a little bit of vanilla. Again, there's the more details of those barrels on here. So seasoned. This is I don't know if I should say this on here. Oh, probably Alex says it all the time. Seasoned barrel is a fight he lost with the lawyers because it's just an ex-Jack Daniels barrel. The reason we say seasoned is because as barrels are being brought to Ireland, most distilleries don't actually have control over exactly which barrels they're getting because they go through, I believe, the Irish consulate. I could be wrong on that, but there is some government involvement there. But because we are partnered and owned by Brown-Forman, we do get exclusively Jack Daniels barrels straight from the distilleries and the cooperages to us. Now, those Jack Daniels barrels, bunch of really beautiful flavors. I also like to say too, Jack Daniels is kind of like the American version of a session whiskey: caramel, plum, banana, butterscotch. If you ask Alex why he chose that Jack Daniels barrel, he'll tell you it all comes down to the banana. I do a terrible Irish accent. I'm sorry, guys. But it's those sweet, soft, buttery banana flavors. They go so well with the whiskey and a good complement to that virgin barrel. Now, last but not least, my personal favorite is an ex-sherry barrel. These are Oloroso sherry casks. Raisins, dried fruits, prunes, baking spice, lots of nuttiness in there. So when you think about these 3 different casks, what we're doing is we're making a layered and balanced and flavorful, rich whiskey. All these flavors together is part of what makes this whiskey so versatile in cocktails and just drinking experiences, and is loved by everybody who tries it. So, again, Celtic names and stuff, I'm not the best. I work really hard at this, so don't be mad at me if I butcher it. But Dr. Garrod Cahill, he is our master distiller for Slane. He came on in 2019, and he is actually one of the very few globally certified master brewers and master distillers. He spent 25, hi, Michael. I love that. 25 years in as a master brewer. He has a PhD in brewery yeast management. This man is a scientist to the fullest effect. And it's one of the things I love about master distillers, master brewers, is the ones with the crazy science backgrounds. They have such cool, unique understanding and approach to how we make these spirits. So he has been our master distiller and distillery manager since 2019. He's got a world of experience. He actually used to be the master brewer for Guinness, which is quite a feat in itself. So I always like to say with all that brilliance and education comes really what is a whiskey that is perfectly paired with Guinness also. So what a great time that is. Slane Irish Whiskey is fun. This is such a stupid slide, but it's true. My thing with Irish whiskey, especially one like Slane, is that just like Irish people are fun, so is this whiskey. This whiskey should be fun. Is there serious elements to it? Absolutely. Would this hold up in a beautiful whiskey tasting? And can we talk about all those nitty-gritty details? Yes. But the spirit of Ireland, the spirit of Irish whiskey, the spirit of Slane is that of fun and magic and family. And that's why it's so great in cocktails. So let's get into it. And also I love, I just threw a couple of pictures in here because I want you guys to see how fun we are. But this is a fun spirit, again, that works in many different places, dive bars, tiki bars, nice restaurants. Making Irish whiskey fun is so important to me. I'm going to stop with these pictures now, but you guys get the idea. So how should we use Irish whiskey? And this is where I would love some more input from Stefi too, but there are the very classic traditional ways that you guys are used to, the St. Patrick's Day stereotypes, but there's so much more to this diverse and beautiful spirit beyond that. Now, obviously we know Irish whiskey is great by itself. Absolutely, Slane is fantastic with a little ice cube in it. I, as somebody who identifies as a sherry slut, I'm a slut for sherry cask finished whiskeys. It's one of the reasons I love working on this brand. But man, Slane makes a great highball. Those beautiful, soft, sweet backbone notes with beautiful soda water, a little orange peel. It's honestly one of my favorite highballs I have. And I also work on some other beautiful, brilliant single malt brands. But when it comes down to it, Slane is my perfect highball. Beyond there, coffee cocktails. We all know coffee cocktails. The Irish coffee obviously is everywhere. But how do you push those bounds? And why does coffee go so well with Irish whiskey? Now, when we talk about the flavors of malted barley and then the flavors of unmalted barley, there's fruitiness in there. There is an unctuous creaminess in there. There's all these vibrant spice notes. Good coffee is like chocolatey, and it's a little bitter sometimes, and it's got nice acid to it. And those flavors, they can exist in an Irish coffee. But beyond that, how do you make a really great espresso martini? This other cocktail on the right, that was an Irish coffee shot that this amazing bartender in Los Angeles did for St. Paddy's Day, Bryn Smith, who runs Bar Next Door. If you're in LA, go there. But how do you utilize those same elements of coffee into other things? Black tea is a big one. Different flavor profiles like that.
My big vice this winter was also hot chocolate, like spiked hot chocolate. And Irish whiskey, especially blended, works so well with that because you have those like baking spice, that sweetness, a little bit of nuttiness from the sherry. If you choose like a higher cocoa content on the chocolate powder that you're using, and then you choose what kind of sugar to put in as well, like Demerara with a bit of Irish whiskey is banging as well.
Absolutely. I'm going to hold off 1 second because my computer is at 70% and I just need to plug it in real quick. I'll be right back.
Well, I guess the show is all me now. Not quite. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I think what I really love about Irish whiskey is like it is so versatile with baking goods and baking spices. One of my favorite uses for it is in milk punch as well, because, you know, obviously I think the easiest things to create through a milk punch is stuff that kind of goes off of a baking repertoire anyway, like pastries, cakes, pies. And so that's why the Irish whiskey goes in so well for that as well. You get that slight lactic note, which I think people often only focus on the coffee element of an Irish coffee, but the cream is so important.
Absolutely.
It breaks my heart seeing people using whipped cream cans on top of Irish coffees because that's a sweetened cream. That's not going to be the same thing as that shaken cream like by hand, you know?
It's funny. I always say this when being from San Francisco, and actually I think the first ever proper Irish coffee I had was at the Buena Vista. Because again, I grew up there and it definitely wasn't before I was 21. But I remember my sisters taking me there and us having that, and all the really wild Irish coffees I have had since then. I always say you either sweeten the coffee or you sweeten the cream. Don't sweeten both. They're not both meant to be sweet, and it just becomes a overly sugar overpowering cocktail that way.
Yeah, that's that's what we found as well. Like we have obviously our Belfast coffee, which is our pochine cold brew kind of twist on an Irish coffee. We kind of say it's between an Irish coffee and an espresso martini that we do. And that has a very specific roast of coffee that we get from a local coffee shop. And then we actually, for our Irish coffee, we don't use the same coffee because it doesn't pair as well with the whiskey as it does with the pochine. So we actually, to create our Irish coffee, we did a blind tasting of all different coffees with all different whiskeys until we collectively as a group decided what Irish coffee we wanted on the menu. And it turns out it's from another artisanal coffee shop on the other side of kind of our neighborhood. So yeah, the coffee pairing with the whiskey or any kind of spirit you're doing it with, you can't just use the same coffee for everything. It has lots of fluctuations, and I know the barista nerds will agree with me and back me up on that one.
Absolutely. So moving on from coffee cocktails, and Stefi, I'm going to let you take the lead on this one because we didn't even plan it. I didn't tell her this was going to be in there, but it's near and dear to my heart, is picklebacks.
So I was a pickleback virgin up until last summer, and I got my first pickleback in New York right after I'd been to Camp Runnemuck with Lush Life. I stopped off in New York on the way back because I'd never been to New York, and it's kind of the Mecca. And obviously, when you're in one of these hubs of great bartending and history and greats, you have to try the traditional drinks. And I found out that a pickleback is one of those. I never ate pickles or drank pickle juice before my first pickleback, and my friend Jordan Duncan, he was like, "No, you have to try it. You have to try it," because he knew how much I hated pickles. Turns out I don't hate pickles. I only hate them if they're not paired with whiskey. So for me, I think the pickleback is such an interesting drink choice because I'd never think that it would balance out that well, because you do a shot of whiskey and then you do a shot of pickle juice straight afterwards. But I've become so enamored with it, I've actually started to go down a little rabbit hole. Thanks to the guys who hosted us for a takeover last week in London, in Dram. They're a whiskey bar, and they were working on their own house pickleback. And I've just gone down the rabbit hole this week after trying that, of making all of these different brines and adding different vinegars, weird hot sauces, garlic in one of them. Like, you know, it's a very savory, sour drink. And if you pair it with the correct whiskeys, it changes the nature of a pickleback entirely, where you're not just having pickle juice to chase the taste away of the Jameson or like whatever Irish whiskey you're having, Slane preferably. But it also it awakens your palate, and you're actually like, oh wow, this is a cocktail that's been deconstructed and you're having it in 2 parts. So I'm just like so mind blown by the whole concept. And then I found out that Jessi also massive pickleback advocate. So
I love picklebacks.
You're bringing it to Ireland. We'll do it. Yeah,
Stefi was telling me that they're not very big in Ireland, and it's funny, here on the West Coast, honestly, they're not very big in LA, and I'm really trying to lead that charge, because even up and down the West Coast, like, they exist, but I'm like, you guys, this is the best time. I do understand there's some of you out there who are not vinegar people, who do not like the sourness. And I'm not talking to you guys, I'm talking to everybody else. But again, like those round, sweet characteristics, that lushness from the malted barley that's in these whiskeys, that's in Slane, it really does go so well with the bright acidity and brininess and saltiness. It's like that perfect salty sweet combo. And going from there, again, I have all these beautiful, incredible people that work on Slane Irish Whiskey, but immediately butted up with St. Patrick's Day. We also had the master blender for the single malt Scotch brands that I work on, Dr. Rachel Berry in town, and she had her first ever pickleback. That up there is a picture of Alex Cunningham, our co-founder, with Dr. Rachel Berry, who, you know, she's widely regarded as one of the best single malt Scotch blenders of all time, having her first pickleback. Nobody texts us to her. She might kill me. But she loved it. I couldn't believe she had never had a pickleback, but again, it makes sense if you're saying it's not that big of a thing in the UK. And so it's really just like, again, part of that communal spirit, that camaraderie thing. When I say Irish people are fun, and so is the whiskey. And the best way to interact with it is having fun with other people.
You're so right. But that's why there's such a market for the pickleback in Ireland, because they love the fun shots. They love the baby Guinness and, you know, tequila, because you get the salt and the lime and everything. They want a bit of fun with it. So that's why I think picklebacks could take over 100%.
I could not agree more. All right, moving on from picklebacks. tropical tiki cocktails. I will die on this hill. It's actually another one that Dr. Rachel Berry being in town, Alex Cunningham being in town, he's been, he helped birth the distillery. He's worked on whiskey forever, but people don't often think about whiskey and tropical in the same vein. Obviously, that does exist in some ways, but when you get into the flavor profiles, and again, we're going to talk more about this in the next slide, but when we talked about Irish whiskey competing with brandy in the 17th century, there are so many similarities just in mouthfeel and flavor profile and sweetness to Irish whiskey, to Slane, that works so well in these cocktails. One of my favorite cocktails in the world with Slane is a Jungle Bird. Beautiful, bright, fluffy pineapple matches that, again, those banana flavors, those baking spice notes, that sweetness. It really just like creates this round, luscious. I honestly kind of like it better with Slane than I do with rum. And none of the tiki people in the comments come for me. I also like it with rum, but man, I love it with Slane Irish whiskey. When we get into things like a Mai Tai, or we do Slane killers, we like to say, but a painkiller pina colada with Slane, it just works. And again, those beautiful, soft marshmallow, vanilla, banana notes to it, the baking spice, the nuttiness, it pairs so well with tropical flavors, passion fruit, guava. One of my favorite cocktails that I had over St. Patrick's Day, we did a really cool bar crawl in downtown LA, but bar called Wolf and Crane, really great Japanese Asian whiskey bar. They do a lot of work with Slane, and they made a super simple ginger, passion fruit, little bit of creme de violette. So refreshing and tropical and delicious. And there's so many beautiful ways to use this spirit, use Irish whiskey in tropical cocktails beyond outside of St. Patrick's Day. Stefi, do you have any favorite tropical cocktails for Irish whiskey?
I'm a big fan of a Jungle Bird, but also like in general, I don't like rum that much. And feel free to come for me in the comments, don't come for Jessi. But I like the idea of tiki cocktails, but I don't like the rum. So I've actually tried out loads of different ones with Irish whiskey. My favorite is a Mai Tai.
Mm-hmm.
Mai Tai, and then you actually split it instead of two different kinds of rum. You do Irish whiskey and cognac instead.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's a banger. That's probably my favorite.
Banger. Yeah, I love that. All right, so moving on from tropical cocktails, classic brandy and rum cocktails. This is an easy one. So one of the things, and honestly, it was a challenge for me too, because in my, my 10 years of working in bars, I didn't ever work in any spaces that had huge selections of Irish whiskey. I've always been a fan of Irish whiskey. I started drinking Irish whiskey as soon as I was drinking with my mom, who's always been a fan of Irish whiskey. And I never was pushed to really play with it until I started working specifically on this brand, because I always worked in different styles of places. And now that I've had so much experience with it, and when you really break down what the flavors are, it's classic brandy and rum cocktails, a brandy crusta. When I make a Vieux Carré, I sub out the cognac for Slane. Honestly, you can also sub out the rye whiskey for Slane, and it just makes this really beautiful balance. This cocktail right here was based off of a Pan American Clipper, which is classically a apple brandy cocktail. So like a Jack Rose, grenadine, lemon, Slane in this case, couple dashes of absinthe. Super simple, but perfect flavors that go together. Those like rich, luscious, round, fruity flavors hit so well with Slane, and it makes so much sense. But again, it's for the same reason when you get into tropical drinks, when you think about older cognac cocktails, sherry cocktails, like a cobbler, throw some Slane in there, and it's just like absolutely beautiful in the drink. There's actually one of my favorite bars in LA, Accomplice, just put on they do a really cool happy hour, like trashy happy hour, trashy cocktail happy hour, where they kind of take back cocktails that are considered trashy. So they did a julep, a cobbler that's basically supposed to be like a green tea shot with Slane in it and like peach brandy, and it's so good and delicious. But it works with all different sorts of flavors and in so many ways.
Also, all right. A brandy Alexander with Slane instead of brandy is so good.
Absolutely. But yeah, put in the comments too if you guys have any favorite ways to use Slane, favorite Irish whiskey cocktails. I'm constantly learning from bartenders and people like yourself that have all sorts of different experience than me. But the more that I interact with the bar community and the more they get pushed to use Slane in new ways that are creative, the more I think exciting it gets to be. So that's all we have for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing in the passion that Stefi and I both have for Irish whiskey and Irish culture in general. I hope that you guys will take everything you learned here today and take it back to your bars and share the Irish spirit. Make yourself a jungle bird with Slane and
make yourself anything with Slane. Like literally, I think that's kind of the thread we were holding is cocktail, just throw Slane in it. You can make that one. This is up Irish whiskey, up Irish whiskey. Well, thank you so much, Jessi. That was absolutely an insane little masterclass on Slane. I thought I knew what I needed to know about Slane, but I learned so much today. So thank you really for your passion and your knowledge. It's been an absolute delight. And yeah, just a few closing things. Just keep an eye out for the Irish Spirits companion PDF that's coming out this week for a few recipes to lift all your spirits. I don't know what the weather's like for any of all of you lovely people out in the world, but in Ireland it's quite rainy and horrible and dreary as ever. But these cocktails will be sure to just lift your spirits no matter what the weather may be. And you can hear all about the stories behind the brands that inspired the cocktails, as well as a little bit more extra bits and pieces that might be thrown in there for you as well. And you can get your copy if you sign up to our newsletter at lushlifeproductions.com/newsletter. And yeah, if you enjoyed this class, please hit the like or love button, depending where you're tuning in from, and show some love in the comments. And if you want to see more Portland Cocktail Week classes like this one, follow Portland Cocktail Week on all of the social medias. We've got the Facebook, and then also YouTube, as well as Instagram, because, you know, it all happens on the gram. So we're also, you can find Jessi at the Jessi Mess and at Slane Whiskey on Instagram. I'm personally at What Were You Expecting? Because what were you expecting? It's still a funny joke 10 years on. And at 1661 Bar as well, if you want to see some of the cool stuff that we do here in Dublin. And yeah, thank you so much for watching our Irish Spirits programming. It's been such a pleasure and an honour to be part of this as well, as a little immigrant who came here for 3 months of Irish whiskey and stayed for the whole 7 years. So yeah, thank you so much for watching and raising a glass, and we'll see you all soon.